Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we're taking a look at a system that is it's so fundamental, so pervasive, we don't even see it as a system.
No, not at all.
We just think of it as, the way things are. But as we're going to find out, it is highly engineered, heavily policed, and it has this deep, deep impact on who gets power and who gets silenced. We're looking at language.
And before we get into the really heavy stuff, I want to start today with a little visualization exercise.
Okay.
I want you, and I'm talking to you, listening right now, assuming you aren't, operating heavy machinery or something, to just close your eyes for a second.
All right, I'm doing it.
Let's get picture a CEO. Just the first image that pops into your head. Don't overthink it. You got it.
Yep, got it.
Now picture a nurse.
Okay.
And finally, picture a genius.
All right, I've got all three.
Now be honest,
Yeah.
and I mean really honest with yourself, in that split second before your conscious brain could kick in and go, hey, wait a minute, women can be CEOs too. How many of those people were men?
Oh, you caught me. You totally caught me. The CEO was definitely a man, silver hair, expensive suit, the whole cliche.
Looking out a window, probably.
Absolutely looking out a window. And the genius, honestly, my brain just went straight to Einstein. So a man. The nurse, though, was a woman.
Right. And look, that doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you a fluent speaker of English and, a participant in our culture. But it perfectly highlights this invisible machinery that we are all just swimming in.
It really does.
Today, we are diving into a book called Wordslut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language by Amanda Montell.
And I love that we are starting with that title because it immediately triggers the exact mechanism we're going to spend the next hour analyzing. You hear that word, that second word in the title, and you have a visceral reaction.
Oh, totally. It's a charged word. Even just saying it now, it feels a little taboo, like I should look over my shoulder.
Exactly. It feels radioactive. But why? Why that word? That is the fundamental question Montell is asking. And she's the right person to ask it. She's a linguist and a reporter, and she treats the English language less like a set of rules and more like, a crime scene.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
She wants to know, how did we get here? How did language become this tool that doesn't just describe reality, but actively polices it?
That's the crisis in perception we're looking at today. We tend to think words are these neutral labels we stick on things. This is a desk, that is a microphone. Simple.
Right.
But Montell's argument, and this is backed up by a ton of linguistic data, is that English, as a system, functions like this: corrupted software code. It's got bugs, it's got glitches, and it has features that were programmed centuries ago, specifically to lower the status of women and raise the status of men.
And we should be super clear when we say programmed. This wasn't some committee of evil men in a room in the year 1200 saying, waha, let's ruin language for women.
Right, it's not a conspiracy.
No, it's actually more subtle and, frankly, more disturbing than that. It's about how language slowly, over time, shapes status, credibility, belonging, all through these so-called standard norms and the stigma we attach to not following them.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We are not here to give you a grammar lesson. Please, God, no grammar lessons.
I solemnly swear no diagramming sentences.
We're focusing on the patterns, on the structures. We want to uncover the machinery that's humming away behind the words we speak every single day. Because this isn't just about what happens in a classroom.
Not at all.
This system impacts workplaces, who gets hired, who gets promoted. It impacts media, who we see as credible, who we trust on the news. It's about the social policing of our very identities.
So let's start with a bit of context. The author, Amanda Montell, she's not just coming at this with an opinion. Her background is in linguistics and reporting. She has this great skill of bridging the gap between, really heavy academic sociolinguistics.
Which would be so dense.
Oh, unbelievably dense and dry. She bridges that with cultural analysis that we can actually understand and apply to our lives.
She's basically a translator. She's taking the work of these researchers who study the nitty-gritty of how we talk and showing us how it plays out in the real world.
And the world she's critiquing is one we all recognize. It's a world filled with prescriptive grammar, the don't end a sentence with a preposition crowd.
Linguistic snobbery.
A whole lot of it. And this pervasive idea of a norm, a single correct way to speak.
And that norm is the key to the whole crisis, isn't it? The conflict between how language is actually evolving on the ground, often driven by women, by queer communities, by people of color.
And this static standard version of the language that is enforced by gatekeepers.
Yeah. So before we get into the really good examples, let's just lay out the central thesis in plain language. Montell is very, very clear about this. The English language is not inherently sexist in its DNA.
Exactly. There is nothing biologically sexist about a vowel or a consonant. You know, the letter A does not hate women.
Right.
However, and this is the whole point, it's social usage and the rules of so-called standard English, they function to reinforce hierarchy. And the system works by policing the voices of women, LGBTQ plus speakers, and people of color, and treating them as deviant from a manufactured norm.
Okay, let's unpack that, because the system reinforces hierarchy. Sounds, a little abstract.
It does. It sounds academic.
Yeah, like something from a sociology textbook that you immediately forget. But Montell gives these incredibly specific and honestly slightly horrifying examples of how this actually works over time.
Yes.
One of the biggest insights in the book, for me, was this concept she calls semantic derogation.
Or the pejoration loop.
Right, pejoration. It really sounds like a medical condition. I'm sorry, sir, you have a bad case of pejoration.
It totally does, but let's break it down. Semantic just refers to meaning. Derogation is the lowering of value or status. In linguistics, we study how words change over time. They don't just stay still.
They drift.
They drift, and sometimes a word drifts up, it gets fancier, it gets a promotion. That's called amelioration.
Okay, give me an example of a word that got a promotion. I want to know which words climbed the social ladder.
A classic example is the word nice.
Nice. That seems pretty basic.
Well, today it is. But back in the 13th century, if I called you nice, I'd be calling you stupid or ignorant.
No way.
Yeah, it came from the Latin natius, which means unaware. But over hundreds of years, it drifted up. It went from stupid to timid to fussy to delicate and finally landed on pleasant. That's amelioration.
Okay, so words can get a glow up. That's nice. Pun intended.
They can. But here is the dark side of that data. When linguists analyze these historical trends, they find a pattern that is, it's statistically impossible to ignore. Words that are associated with men tend to either stay neutral or ameliorate. They get better.
And words associated with women?
They almost always pejorate. They slide down the ladder into the mud.
This is the pejoration loop.
This is the loop. And the most famous example, the one that just lays the whole double standard bare, is this split between master and mistress.
Now, we use those words today, but I don't think most of us realize they started out as exact equivalents.
They were perfect mirrors of each other. If you go back, say, 500 or 600 years, they meant the same thing. The male head of a household was the master. The female head of a household was the mistress. Both words implied authority, control, respect. They were basically job titles.
So what happened? What sent them on such different paths?
Well, just look at master today. It has held its ground. You could even argue it's ameliorated. You get a master's degree. You master a skill. It implies total competence. It's a power word.
Absolutely. And mistress?
Mistress took a complete nosedive. By the 17th, 18th centuries, society's view of women's power started to get, nervous. A woman with authority was seen as suspicious, maybe dangerous. And slowly, the word started to pick up these sexual connotations.
So it went from woman in charge of a house
to woman who is kept by a man. It became exclusively defined by a sexual relationship, and usually an illicit one at that.
Wow. It's like the culture couldn't handle the idea of female authority, so it had to sexualize it to diminish it to put it back in a box.
That is the exact mechanism. It creates a linguistic environment where female power is inherently unstable. It always degrades into sexuality. And the really scary part is that it's not just one word. If it were just master and mistress, you could maybe say, oh, that's a fluke. But the pattern is everywhere. Look at hussy.
Okay, hussy. I always thought of that as just a funny, kind of old-timey insult. Something a character in a black and white movie would say, don't be such a hussy.
Its origin is actually the word housewife.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Specifically, the Middle English housewife.
You're kidding. So it was a completely neutral term.
It was a term of respect. It meant the female head of the household. A neutral, even positive title. But then, over a couple of centuries, it starts to shift. First, it comes to mean a rustic woman, which is basically a class insult.
Okay, so it's a step down.
A big step down. And then it devolves even further into lewd woman or promiscuous woman. So you see that exact trajectory again. Authority to a class insult to a sexual insult.
That is such a depressing slide.
And it gets even worse. Let's talk about the word slut.
Okay, this one from the book, this one blew my mind because we think of slut as maybe the ultimate gendered insult today. But Montell points out that its origins were, what, domestic?
Completely. It originally just meant untidy or messy. Like if your room was messy or your kitchen was disorganized, you were being a slut.
And it wasn't just for women.
No. And this is the part that's so wild. Chaucer, the father of English literature, used it to describe a man.
A man could be a slut.
Yes. In the Canterbury Tales, he describes a man's appearance as sluttish because he was unkempt and slovenly. It had zero to do with sex.
So how on earth did it become what it is today?
The system of language acts like a filter. For men, the word untidy it just means messy, no big deal. But for women, being untidy was increasingly seen as a sign of a deeper moral failing. So the meaning narrowed, and it narrowed specifically onto women and specifically onto their sexual morality.
It's the same pattern over and over. A word starts neutral, it gets applied to women, and it just plummets.
The linguistic system is basically a record of our biases. It encodes this history where proximity to femininity degrades a word's status.
And I'm thinking of spinster, too. That feels like it fits right in here.
Oh, spinster is a perfect and fascinating example because it's really an economic story. Originally, a spinster was just a woman who spun wool for a living.
A literal job description. Well, that's it.
Yes. And you have to remember, in the pre-industrial era, spinning wool was one of the very few ways an unmarried woman could earn her own money, independent of a father or a husband. So a spinster was an economically independent woman. She didn't need to marry for survival.
That sounds incredibly empowering for the time.
It was. But look at how the culture metabolized that idea. The independent woman slowly became the unwanted woman, the failure, the woman who couldn't find a man. The word pejorated from a sign of economic strength to a sign of pitiful isolation.
So the system's outcome here is that language isn't just a neutral mirror of reality. It's actively encoding a bias where women are constantly reduced to their sexual function or their marital status, while men get to remain the neutral, authoritative default.
Which brings us perfectly to the second major insight from the book, the default male standard.
This is the idea that maleness is the invisible default setting for humanity, and femaleness is the marked category. It's like you have to put a special sticker on it to warn people, hey, this one's not a man.
Exactly. Just go back to our visualization exercise at the start. We said doctor, and your brain probably defaulted to a man. So in conversation, if we're talking about a woman in that role, we often feel the need to say female doctor.
Right.
That modifier, female, is necessary because the default is assumed to be male.
But we never say male doctor. That would sound so weird. Like I have an appointment with my male doctor. People would think you were being incredibly specific for a reason.
They'd think you have a particular plumbing issue, maybe, because doctor already implies male to our conditioned brains. And here's where Montell points out something really interesting. When men enter spheres that are culturally coded as female, the language has to work overtime to protect their masculinity.
Oh, you mean like calling a male nurse a merce?
Exactly, merce, or guyliner for eyeliner.
And bun, and cave, manscaping.
Think about the deep insecurity that is embedded in those words. The incentive structure of the system is so revealing here. The message is that to be neutral, or professional, is to emulate the male standard. So if a man steps outside that standard into a female zone, like nursing or makeup or carrying a bag...
It can't just be a bag.
No, the language has to invent a new term to reassure everyone, don't worry, he's still a man. It's a man bag, not a purse. It has to brand it to protect his status.
Meanwhile, women are just supposed to be fine with mankind, supposedly including us, or that for centuries the generic he was used to mean any human, which effectively erases female presence from language.
That erasure is a feature, not a bug. It reinforces that feedback loop where the male experience is treated as the universal human experience, and the female experience is a special niche deviation from the norm.
Okay, so this brings us to something that I think almost everyone listening has either experienced firsthand or, well, let's be honest, has probably been the perpetrator of at some point. And that is the policing of the voice itself, the actual sound.
This is one of the most tangible ways this crisis in perception shows up day to day. We're not just judging words in a dictionary anymore. We're judging the actual sound waves coming out of people's mouths.
Specifically, things like vocal fry, uptalk, and the word like.
Ah, yes, the unholy trinity of bad speech, according to the gatekeepers.
Let's start with vocal fry. Can you just explain What is physically happening when someone uses it? Because people react to it like it's nails on a chalkboard.
So physically, it's just a vocal register. Like you have your head voice, which is high, your chest voice in the middle, and then at the very bottom of your pitch range, you have the fry register. It happens when your vocal cords get really loose and they flutter slowly, usually below about 90 hertz. It creates that low, creaky, popping sound.
And the cultural narrative, the story we're told, is that this is some kind of disease affecting young women. I mean, you have public radio hosts like Bob Garfield calling it repulsive or a mindless affectation. It gets completely pathologized as a sign of insecurity or trying to sound cool and failing miserably.
And this is the absolute kicker. Men do it all the time.
All the time. Who? Give me some names.
Well, the book points out some big ones. Ira Glass.
The voice of public radio himself.
He lives in the fry register. And someone like Noam Chomsky, maybe the most famous intellectual voice in America, he uses it constantly. But in men, that low, creaky voice is interpreted as authoritative, relaxed, a good radio voice, or deeply intellectual.
But in women, it's read as annoying, ditzy, or trying to sound like a Kardashian.
The exact same physical sound, that same 90 hertz flutter of the vocal cords, is interpreted completely differently depending on the gender of the person speaking. The system design here is to pathologize the natural speech patterns of young women as a way to undermine their authority before they've even said anything of substance.
The listener literally hears the gender, not the competence.
That's it.
And then there's uptalk, the rising intonation at the end of a sentence, like you're asking a question, even when you're making a statement.
Yeah, this one is always labeled as insecure. The story is, oh, she doesn't sound confident. She's asking for my approval. But what Montell points to is all this linguistic research showing that uptalk is actually a really sophisticated conversational tool.
A power tool, even, in some contexts.
It can be. For one thing, it's used to hold the floor in a conversation. If I drop my pitch at the end of a sentence, like this, it signals a full stop. It's an invitation for you to jump in and interrupt me.
Right, it's a period.
It's a period.
Right.
But if I raise my pitch at the end of the sentence, I'm signaling, I'm not finished yet, there's more coming, keep listening. It's a comma.
There's that amazing study you mentioned from the source about the male experts in Hong Kong. I think we need to dig into that because it just completely flips the script on the whole insecurity argument.
Yes, this was a fantastic study. Researchers recorded these high-level business meetings in Hong Kong. We're talking about powerful men, CEOs, leaders in their fields, and they found that these men used uptalk constantly.
So the CEOs were speaking like Valley Girls, basically.
Yeah. In terms of their intonation patterns, yes. But because they were powerful men, the researchers didn't just dismiss it. They analyzed the function of the uptalk. And it wasn't insecurity. They were using it to pressure their subordinates into agreeing with them.
How did that work?
Well, if a boss says, so we're all in agreement that we're going to finish this by Friday, with that rising tone, he's not actually asking if it's possible.
No, he's demanding you nod your head. It's a command disguised as a question.
It's a dominance move. It checks for consensus while simultaneously manufacturing that consensus. But when a young woman does the exact same thing, our perception filter automatically translates it from checking for consensus to asking for permission.
That is absolutely maddening.
It's the crisis in perception in a perfect nutshell.
And finally, we have to talk about like. Oh my gosh, the word like. We are told constantly, stop saying like. It's a filler word. It's verbal garbage. It makes you sound like a teenager.
And yet, linguists will go to the mat to defend like. It's not just filler, it's what they call a discourse marker. And it performs several really specific and useful functions.
Okay, so let's role play this. If I just say to you, he was 10 feet tall.
Okay, that's a factual claim. If he was actually 6'2", you're lying. I can call you out on it.
Right, but what if I say he was like 10 feet tall?
Now it's totally different. You're signaling to me that you're using hyperbole, you're approximating, you're telling a story, and you're flagging for me, hey, don't take the next few words literally, take them for their emotional weight.
So it actually adds a layer of nuance. It allows for approximation, for softening a statement.
It's incredibly useful, and people have been using it for centuries to soften directives so they don't sound too aggressive. But because its modern use is so strongly associated with young women, we treat it as a sign of stupidity instead of linguistic sophistication.
So the system outcome is that women are constantly told to fix their voices, stop the fry, drop the uptalk, cut out the likes, in order to be hired or respected. But the evidence shows that even when men use those exact same traits, the outcome is totally different.
Because the problem was never the sound. The problem is the listener's pre-existing bias against the speaker.
Which leads us right into the double bind. This is the ultimate damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario.
This is the incentive structure that women in power or aspiring to power are trapped in. The system is rigged so that you have to choose between two different penalties. There's no winning move.
Okay, so what are the two choices?
Penalty A. You speak in a stereotypically feminine way. You're soft, you're cooperative, maybe you use some uptalk to build consensus. The result, you might be seen as likable, but you're also perceived as incompetent, weak, or not a leader.
And penalty B?
Penalty B. You try to avoid that, so you speak in a more masculine way. You're direct. You use a lower pitch. You're declarative. The result, okay, maybe people see you as competent. But now you're shrill, you're bitchy, cold, you're abrasive, you're unlikable.
Hillary Clinton is the textbook example that Montell uses. When she had to project her voice to be heard by a large crowd at a rally, she was relentlessly criticized for being shrill or barking.
Whereas men who shout at rallies are described as passionate, they're fiery, they're commanding.
And this plays out in the workplace every single day. I'm thinking of what the book calls the email dance. I feel this in my bones.
The exclamation point economy.
Yes. If I, as a woman, write an email that just says, please have this on my desk by 5, I feel like an absolute monster. I feel like I'm screaming at them.
Right. You have to manage their feelings.
So I have to write, hey, hope you're having a great day. Just wanted to check in on this. If you could get it over to me by 5, that'd be amazing. Thanks so much.
All of those exclamation points, the smiley faces, the softeners, that is a conscious strategy to navigate the double bind. You're softening a direct request to avoid the bitch penalty, but in doing so, you risk being seen as less serious, the incompetent or girlish penalty.
It's a rigged game where professionalism is just coded as a particular style of male communication.
It makes achieving female authority structurally, systematically difficult.
It really feels like a trap.
But
And here is where the story gets really interesting and, frankly, a little more hopeful. Despite all of this policing and all this pressure, it's the marginalized groups who are actually inventing the coolest and most innovative parts of our language.
yes, insight number 5, reformation and reclamation. The system tries to crush or correct these voices, but the people on the margins innovate as a means of survival and solidarity.
Innovation from the margins.
And a great historical example of this is Polari.
I had never even heard of Polari before reading this book. What was it?
Polari was essentially a secret language, or a cant slang, used by gay men in Britain. It was most common from about the 1930s to the 1960s, a time when homosexuality was completely illegal.
So this was a matter of safety.
A matter of life and liberty. You could be arrested, imprisoned, even chemically castrated for being gay. So they needed a code to recognize each other and communicate safely in public without being discovered.
And what was it made of?
It was this amazing theatrical mix of Italian Romani, rhyming slang, back slang, all sorts of linguistic odds and ends. It allowed them to talk openly right under the noses of people who might harm them.
Can you give us an example? Teach us a little Polari.
Sure. So you might hear someone in a pub say, "Vada the eek on that omi."
Vada the eek on that omi. Breaking that down.
Vada means look at. It's from Italian. Eek is back slang for face, and omi is Italian for man. So look at the face on that man.
Wow.
Or a greeting might be, "Bona te vada, your dolly old eek."
Good to see your pretty face.
Exactly. Bona for good, dolly for pretty or nice. It was a survival mechanism, but it was also creative and funny, and it built this incredible sense of community in a hostile world.
And we see a similar dynamic today with the reclamation of slurs. Words like queer, dyke, and even bitch.
This is such a fascinating and a complex power move. It's about taking a word that was designed as a weapon to hurt you, and you and your community seize it, you diffuse it, you start using it for solidarity.
Right, like when women use bitch as a term of endearment or empowerment among themselves.
It completely changes the power dynamic of that word. It's a way of saying, you can't hurt me with this anymore. This is ours now. We own it.
And let's not forget teenage girls. We give them so much grief for how they talk.
We do, and they are the unsung heroes of linguistic innovation.
We mock them. We make fun of the Valley Girl accent, the vocal fry, the like. But Montell's book makes it so clear that young women are historically the primary drivers of language change. They're the ones introducing new words, new grammatical structures that eventually go mainstream.
Teenage girl speak is usually about a generation ahead of everyone else. The way a 16-year-old girl talks today is very likely how a 45-year-old male executive will be talking in 20 years, probably without having any idea where it came from.
So we've got this complex system. We've analyzed the core insights. Let's try to zoom out now and actually map it. Who are the key actors in this system?
Okay, so you have the gatekeepers. These are the media pundits, like the Bob Garfield we mentioned. They're the hiring managers who might throw out a resume because a name sounds a certain way. They're the institutions like schools that teach this very rigid, prescriptive grammar as if it's moral law.
And it's not just powerful institutions. There's that story Montell tells about the tweed-clad mother on the subway. This is like the civilian gatekeeper.
Oh, that story is perfect. So Montell is on the train, she's young, she's with some friends, and she uses the word y'all.
And this woman, this stranger, literally gasps.
Yeah.
She interrupts their private conversation and says something like, "You can't say y'all. People think you're stupid," or worse, that you're Southern.
The absolute horror. But look at the incentives at play in that moment. For that gatekeeper, the mother, the incentive is to maintain her own status. By defining y'all as bad English, she elevates her own way of speaking as proper and therefore superior. She's policing a boundary to reinforce her own class position.
But for Montell, the innovator in that situation, she points out that y'all is actually an incredibly useful linguistic tool. It fills a real gap in the English language.
A huge gap. The second person plural, English has a hole there. We have I and we have he, she, and they. But for you, we use the exact same word, whether we're talking to one person or 100 people. It's inefficient and confusing.
And y'all fixes it. Plus, it's gender neutral. You guys, which a lot of people use as gendered, y'all is for everyone. It's a perfect word.
But the narrative the mother is enforcing is proper English equals intelligence and morality. The counter-narrative, the linguistic truth, is that language evolves to become more efficient and useful.
So that creates the feedback loop. The stigma like mocking vocal fry or y'all leads to self-monitoring, where women and other groups start policing their own voices to try and fit in.
Which leads to conformity with the male-coded norms, which then reinforces the idea that male equals professional.
Which in turn creates even more stigma for anyone who dares to deviate from that norm. It just feeds itself.
And the illusion that keeps the whole engine running is this idea of fairness. People think, I'm not sexist, I just have high standards for grammar. It completely obscures the fact that proper grammar was largely codified by a very specific group of wealthy white men in a specific time period for the specific purpose of excluding other people.
We're enforcing a social hierarchy and telling ourselves it's just a grammar lesson.
That's the crisis in perception right there.
Okay, so what does this look like right now, today? We're not in the 1800s anymore. We live in a time where we think we're pretty progressive about this stuff.
The implications are still everywhere. Just look at hiring and performance reviews. There's a phenomenon that linguists call hypercorrection.
This is when people from, say, lower middle class backgrounds,
Right.
and often women, overcorrect their grammar because they're trying to signal a higher status.
Exactly. They're so afraid of making a mistake that they end up making different kinds of mistakes, like saying between you and I instead of between you and me, because I sounds more formal or correct to them. They're trying so hard to follow the rules to gain that safety, that class mobility.
But the tragic part is they often still get penalized anyway.
Right. You can have grammatically perfect sentences, but if you have vocal fry or a regional accent that's stigmatized, you're still perceived as less hireable or less competent.
And then there's the clear penalty for sounding gay.
Yes. The documentary Do I Sound Gay, which is referenced in the book, explores this so well. The gay voice, which is often stereotyped by things like a more sibilant S or certain intonation patterns, is heavily stigmatized in many professional settings.
It's coded as unserious or flamboyant, while a deep, resonant, heteronormative male voice is coded as leadership material.
It's that manufactured competence again. We are conditioned to hear a deep voice and think leader. We hear a higher-pitched voice or a sibilant S and think assistant. It's a heuristic, a shortcut our biased brains take.
And look at media framing. We talked about Hillary Clinton, but you can apply this to almost any woman in politics. The shrill critique is constant. We are biologically wired to perceive low-pitched sounds as larger and more threatening, authoritative, and high-pitched sounds as smaller, less threatening, or emotional.
It's a biological fact that gets weaponized by cultural bias.
And there's the persistent, infuriating myth that women talk too much.
Oh, this one. The nagging wife, the chatty woman.
It drives me crazy. because the data shows the complete opposite.
It's not even close. Study after study, in boardrooms, in classrooms, in mixed-gender conversations, shows that men dominate the talking time. They interrupt far more often.
But our perception is so warped, because our cultural expectation is that women should be quiet. When a woman talks for, say, 30% of the time in a meeting, she is perceived as having dominated the conversation.
A man could talk for 70% of the time and be perceived as contributing. It's about the gap between expectation and reality.
And now we have online culture, which has just put all of this on hyperspeed.
It's a total accelerant. On the one hand, you have this incredible acceleration of language evolution. Internet slang is born, evolves, and dies in the span of months.
And we should be clear, so much of that slang words like shade, tea, woke, on fleek, is appropriated from AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English, or from drag and ballroom culture.
Absolutely. These words start in brilliant, innovative, marginalized communities, specifically Black and queer communities. Then they get picked up online. Then they filter into the mainstream. Then suddenly, a major corporate brand is tweeting, "Spill the tea."
And the structural recurrence is so clear. When the marginalized group invents and uses the term, it's often mocked or seen as ghetto or uneducated. When the mainstream appropriates it, it suddenly becomes cool and edgy.
And by the time the corporation is using it, it's already cringe, and the original innovators have moved on to create something new to maintain their own cultural space.
It's a continuous cycle of cultural extraction.
It is, and it just highlights this constant tension between the democratization of language online, where anyone can have a voice, and the intense backlash from the language purists who want to police it all.
Which brings us right back to the central theme of this channel, crisis in perception. This book helps us see we aren't just looking at words on a page. We are looking at how our perception of competence itself is socially manufactured.
And we have to shift the focus from blaming the individual to analyzing the system. That Pantene ad is such a perfect example of this tension.
Oh, I remember this ad so well. The one where it shows all these women saying sorry constantly. Sorry, can I squeeze past? Sorry to bother you. And the ad's message is, don't be sorry, be strong.
And on the surface, that feels empowering. The message is stop apologizing. But if you look at it through a systems lens, what is it actually doing? It's placing the entire burden on the individual woman.
Right. It's saying she's the one doing something wrong. She needs to fix her speech.
It completely ignores why women have been conditioned to use sorry so much.
Women say sorry because it's a social lubricant. It's a cooperative strategy. It's a way to be polite and de-escalate potential conflict in a world that consistently punishes women for being direct.
Exactly. What we call women's language is often far more cooperative. It uses hedges like, I think maybe we could try this, to build consensus and leave space for others rather than just issuing a command, do this. The ad tells women to start acting more like men instead of asking society to start valuing the highly sophisticated, cooperative communication style that women have developed to survive.
It's all about manufacturing competence based on this one very narrow male-coded model. Professionalism is just a performance of low-pitch, direct, unemotional speech.
And because these norms get enforced as common sense or just good grammar, the power dynamics behind them are rendered invisible. It's really hard to dismantle a system when most people don't even see it as a system. They just think they're correcting a typo.
So changing this is incredibly difficult.
Extremely. Because you're not just fighting against a rule book. You are fighting against 1,000 years of social conditioning about who deserves to be heard and who should stay quiet.
So let's try to wrap this up with a little reflection. After going through all of this, what does a book like Wordslut really help us see differently?
I think for me, it helps us see language as infrastructure. It's not just decoration. It's the roads, the bridges, the power grid of our social reality. And it's designed to give some people an express lane while others are stuck in traffic or can't even get on the highway.
It dictates who gets heard and who gets systematically silenced.
And it really exposes the bias in our own ears. We all do it. We automatically assign more intelligence or credibility to someone with a standard accent or a deep voice. And seeing that as a flaw in our own perception, not as an objective truth about the speaker, that's a huge shift.
And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is reevaluating what we call women's language. We're taught to see it as weak or insecure.
When it's not.
No. It's often incredibly sophisticated. It listens, it builds consensus, it connects. These stereotypically men's language, and these are broad generalizations, of course, can be much more competitive, more about monologue, more isolating. And yet our culture values the monologue over the connection.
Which is a loss for everyone, men included.
It really is. So here's a final thought for you to mull over. We spend so much energy policing how people speak. We critique the tone, the pitch, the accent, the slang, the grammar. What if we just stopped? If we stopped filtering everything people say through these incredibly biased lenses? What new ideas, what new perspectives would we finally be able to hear?
What genius are we currently missing just because it was delivered in vocal fry?
Exactly. That's the question.
A huge thank you to Amanda Montell for her book, Wordslut, a feminist guide to taking back the English language, which served as the source for this deep dive.
If you want to dig deeper, please go read it or get it from your library. And remember, this project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.